We are back with another Project Drifter devlog, my top-down, physics-based, vehicle roguelite indie game, which you can keep fully up to date with by subscribing to this channel. In our last devlog, we took our basic prototype and added a system that neatly and randomly generates a system of huge rooms that link together using some cool dungeon generation algorithms. Now, each of these rooms are still just huge squares, but we're going to fix that later on. We have more pressing things I want to sort out this devlog. This week, I want to make the game look like it has more depth, like visual depth, because currently it looks incredibly flat. I was going to make the start and exit points for the level, but that went not as planned. So like I said, we're going to look at depth today. But we did add in a level intro screen, so that looks pretty nice. Anyway, to add this depth, I found I used roughly 3 techniques to make my 2D game appear more three-dimensional, or 2.5D as some people like to call it. The first thing I did that really helped with this sort of third dimensional problem worked really well, and it wasn't until just now that I realised why. So I got a comment from Torheed Game Dev to add a dynamically scaling camera according to the player's move speed, like in the original GTA game. I thought this was a great idea and went to implement it straight away. It didn't take long at all, and when combined with my dynamic camera positioning, the dynamic camera scaling looked incredible. I am extremely pleased with this effect, and so it's definitely going to stay in the game. The effect of the zoom in and out not only looks really cool, but it also gives the illusion that the camera viewing the game is moving closer or further away, and so helps to provide that sense of depth. It helps trick the mind into thinking that there is some sort of verticality to what is being presented on screen. I then got sidetracked and gave the bullets trails so you can see their trajectory more easily. I've not really started work on the combat properly yet, but having the really small, hard to track bullets was annoying me, so I thought I'd make this small change. So how else are we going to make our game look like it has more depth? It's easy to show length and width, because those are the 2 dimensions most things happen in. But the third dimension of height is kind of tricky, especially from the completely top-down viewpoint I'm using, because it sort of extends directly into the screen. There is one thing we had implemented from our prototype though that already shows depth. That thing is the skids that are currently added when the car turns sharply. People are constantly using what they have already seen and experienced in real life as a reference point for each new experience. So even in an abstracted art form like a game, we still expect to see skids appear under a car, not above the car. Since they've been implemented on a separate layer, they always do, and so logically, we can assume the car is above the skids. This helps to give at least some sense of vertical height from ordering. Objects in the game world overlap in a predictable and logical way. So again, I used this idea of vertical height by ordering, but in the opposite direction. Instead of putting something under the car, I decided to add something above the car. The first thing that sprang to mind for something like this was to add a dust storm particle effect in the air. This would make dust particles stream across the screen at varying sizes. To further the effect, the speed of the particles is determined by their size, with larger ones moving faster as they whiz by close to the camera, and the smaller particles moving slower as they're further away and closer to the ground. I really like this effect, and when it's combined with the transition menu, I think it makes for some really nice looking visuals. It has also given me some ideas for the next biomes after this initial wasteland zone. Like perhaps an icy tundra with snow particles flying across the screen, or even a volcanic hellscape with burning ash floating through the air. Hopefully we can do art updates for things like this in the future. I was having such good results from intentionally implementing these layering ideas, I thought another thing I could do would be to add some shadows to the cars. I tried a number of methods such as skewing the car sprite and pasting the car multiple times in a given direction, but none of them really looked how I wanted. I imagined the light source for this game is coming directly from overhead at a similar angle to the view of the camera, so having a sideways shadow would feel a bit off. I settled on this sort of outward spreading shadow that just goes around the perimeter of the car. It looks okay, but I'm not sure how happy I am with it, so I may turn it off or revisit this at a later date. But for now, it leaves the idea floating in the game and helps the car to stick out a little bit more from the background, so we'll keep it in for now. As one final addition to this idea, I put some particles that come up from the back of the wheels above the skids. I think this makes sense as driving through a sandy, deserty, wasteland canyon at a high speed would result in the tyres kicking up dust behind it. Again, I'm not sure if I'm fully settled on the look I've gone for, but for now we'll stick with it because I think it's a huge improvement over leaving it out. So it stays for now. For this final depth edition, at least for now, I really wanted to add something that would properly pop out of the screen. I wanted to create some sort of effect that was really going to boost the look of my game and help it stand out amongst all of the other 2D and 2.5D titles out there. I was browsing the internet looking for ideas, and then I realised that I could probably draw 3D looking walls that change shape to match the camera perspective without actually having to implement properly 3D objects. It required some quick maths and a bit of research online to find other people who had solved similar problems, and eventually I got to this resulting solution that I think looks really nice. The bottom of each wall object always stays in the exact same location, but then the top moves relative to the center position of the camera to give the illusion of 3D. We track each of the corner locations for this theoretical cube and then use the draw sprite pos function in GameMaker to warp a sprite to fit each side of the cube. I'm using these grey boxes to texture it for now, but I have some ideas on how it will look different later on. But I think the effect just by itself adds so much to the depth of the game, and I'm really happy with how it's turned out. However, I know at some point I'm going to need to add lots of these to each room if I'm going to make the rooms more interesting than just a big open square. There'll be lots of walls and structures within a room to make it more varied and interesting, so I thought I'd stress test my game by adding a huge chunk of these walls to each room. And this, it completely tanked the game's FPS. I know that generating these levels with almost maze-like structures will be a core part of the game, and I'm going to need to be able to handle lots of walls at the same time. So my focus for next week is going to be on optimization. We're going to have to get to a state where we can draw hundreds of these 3D looking walls in each room at a smooth 60 frames per second, instead of the current value of about 1 frame a second. So we've got a lot of ground to cover, but that's going to be a problem for us to solve next week. If you want to keep following the development of Project Drifter, subscribe to my channel and you won't miss any future updates. We're going to keep working and making steady progress on the game, and it's already shaping up to be something really great in my mind. Follow me on Twitter or even join the Discord where you can ask me questions directly about the game or anything else. And as I said, next devlog we're going to be looking at doing some optimization to try and fix some of this poorly written first pass code that I've done. So, until next time, goodbye.